It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday morning. Thomas Tom Callahan, a 37-year-old financial analyst, arrived at the South Tower of the World Trade Center around 8:30 a.m., as he had done almost every weekday for the past 5 years. He worked on the 87th floor in a sleek, glass-walled office, providing him with a panoramic view of New York City. This morning, the sun had risen over the Hudson River, casting a golden hue on the buildings below. Tom felt a sense of calm as he looked out over the cityscape, sipping his morning coffee, unaware of how dramatically his life would change within the next hour. The usual buzz of office activity filled the air. Colleagues greeted one another, phones rang, and the hum of computers signaled the start of another busy day. Tom was engrossed in the morning's financial reports when a thunderous explosion suddenly shattered the routine calm. The entire building shuddered violently, and the lights flickered. Tom's coffee mug flew from his desk, shattering against the floor. Screams and the sounds of breaking glass erupted around him. His heart pounded as he instinctively dove under his desk, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The initial impact was on the North Tower. Tom's building, the South Tower, seemed to vibrate with shockwaves from the explosion next door. He could see a plume of smoke rising from the other building, flames licking the sky. People began to scramble for the exits, panic evident in their eyes. Tom hesitated for a moment, but then his training kicked in. He grabbed his briefcase and phone, racing towards the emergency stairwell with the rest of his coworkers. They had descended only a few floors when a voice crackled over the building's PA system, advising everyone to remain calm and return to their offices. It was just a fire in the North Tower, the voice assured them, and the South Tower was secure. Tom felt a surge of relief wash over him. The firefighters would handle it, just like they always did. He and many others turned back and returned to their offices, unaware of the unfolding catastrophe. Tom reached his desk, trying to call his wife, Anna, to let her know he was okay, but the lines were already jammed. He left a hurried voicemail instead, telling her not to worry. Just as he hung up, the second impact hit. This time, the sound was deafening, the building groaned and swayed, throwing Tom off his feet. He felt the air being sucked out of the room as the pressure changed. The floor beneath him buckled, and the walls around him cracked. Tom's instincts screamed at him to move, to get out, but he was frozen with fear, unable to comprehend what was happening. A moment later, the blaring alarm jolted him into action. The South Tower had been hit, and he was on one of the floors directly affected. He stumbled to his feet, his ears ringing, and saw the chaotic scene unfold around him. Smoke billowed into the room, and people screamed, some running aimlessly while others tried to help the injured. Tom grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and used it to break the glass of a nearby window. Fresh air rushed in, mixing with the smoke and debris. He leaned out, gasping for breath, looking down at the sheer drop below. Panic set in, his mind racing for a plan, a way out. He couldn't go down, the stairwells were blocked by debris and fire. The elevators had stopped working. He was trapped. Tom's eyes scanned the horizon, desperately searching for any signs of rescue. From his vantage point, he could see the chaos unfolding below, police cars, fire trucks, ambulances, and thousands of people running away from the towers. Helicopters buzzed in the distance, but none came close enough to offer hope. His thoughts drifted to Anna and their unborn child, the baby they had just learned about a week ago. They had plans, dreams. He needed to survive. Tom turned back to the office. Several of his coworkers were gathered at the window now, peering out in shock. Smoke was thickening in the room, making it hard to see or breathe. "We need to stay low," he shouted, trying to keep his voice steady. "Wet your clothes and cover your mouths." He grabbed his jacket, dumped it in the water cooler that had toppled over, and tied it around his face. The others followed his lead, clutching their makeshift masks. As the minutes ticked by, the reality of their situation became clearer. There were no fire alarms, no firefighters rushing to their rescue. They were isolated, cut off from any means of escape. The heat was intensifying, and Tom could feel the floor beneath them growing hotter. He went back to the window, the only source of air that wasn't tainted with smoke. The streets below looked so distant, so impossibly far away. Tom's mind flashed through the possibilities. Should they stay put and hope for rescue? Should they try to climb down the outside of the building? The idea seemed impossible, yet his survival instincts kept gnawing at him. Maybe there was a way. Maybe he could find something in the office to use as a rope to secure himself and climb down. But a glance out the window reminded him of the sheer scale of the descent. There were nearly 90 stories between him and the ground. The thought of jumping entered his mind, uninvited. He tried to push it away, but it kept creeping back. The stories from people trapped in fires, who jumped rather than burn alive. He looked down again, feeling the pull of gravity, the finality of that choice. His legs trembled at the thought. Was it better to choose the end, rather than suffer the agony of burning or suffocating? He shook his head, trying to clear the dark thoughts. Tom turned back to his coworkers, who were huddled together, eyes wide with fear. "We need to signal for help," he said, trying to keep his voice firm. He grabbed a piece of debris and began waving it out the window, hoping to catch the attention of someone, anyone. Others joined in, waving jackets, pieces of paper, anything they could find. But from this height, they were invisible specks against the towering inferno. The smoke was getting thicker, the air harder to breathe. Tom's thoughts grew hazy, and he struggled to stay conscious. The sound of sirens and distant cries from the streets below reached his ears, muffled and far away, as if coming from another world. He wondered if Anna knew what was happening. Had she heard about the attack? Was she safe? He pictured her at home, clutching the ultrasound photo they had framed on their nightstand. Tears stung his eyes. Another explosion rocked the tower, this one closer. Tom felt the building shudder, and he knew they were running out of time. His mind flashed to the final option once more. Was it selfish to want to escape the pain? Or was it the only choice left? His thoughts were interrupted by a shout from one of his coworkers. "Look! There's a helicopter," someone yelled, pointing. Tom squinted through the haze and saw it, a small helicopter hovering near the top of the North Tower. For a brief moment, hope surged through him. Maybe they were starting rescues. Maybe they had a chance. But the helicopter didn't come closer. It stayed distant, as if assessing the situation, and then it turned away, disappearing into the smoke-filled sky. Tom's heart sank. If they couldn't rescue those at the top, what hope was there for them? Despair settled in like a weight on his chest. The room was unbearably hot now, the smoke nearly suffocating. Tom could hear people coughing, gasping for breath. His own lungs burned, each breath a struggle. He looked out the window one more time. The streets below were barely visible through the haze. He felt a strange sense of calm, a detachment from reality. The world seemed to slow down, the chaos around him fading into the background. He turned to his coworkers, seeing the same fear and resignation mirrored in their eyes. They were all thinking the same thing. The choice was upon them. Stay and suffer or leap into the unknown. Tom closed his eyes, remembering Anna's smile, the sound of her laughter. He thought of their child, growing inside her, a life he might never meet. The pain of that realization was almost too much to bear. He opened his eyes and looked out the window again. He could see figures in the North Tower, some leaning out of windows, waving desperately. Others had already made the choice he was contemplating, falling like silent shadows to the ground below. Tom's heart pounded, his body trembling. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, fear, and memories. He took a step closer to the edge, feeling the wind on his face. It was oddly soothing, a reminder of the world outside this nightmare. He thought of Anna again, of the life they had planned. He didn't want to die. But the fire, the smoke, the heat, it was too much. He couldn't see a way out. Just then, a faint noise reached his ears. It was coming from the stairwell, a muffled sound of banging, shouting. Tom's heart skipped a beat. Could it be firefighters, finally reaching their floor? He turned away from the window, straining to hear. The noise was getting louder, more distinct. Tom's eyes widened with hope. Maybe they still had a chance. Maybe help was coming. He rushed to the stairwell door, ignoring the heat radiating from it. He pounded on the door, shouting as loud as he could, his voice hoarse from the smoke. The noise on the other side grew louder, a cacophony of banging and muffled voices. Tom's heart raced. He pounded harder, shouting until his voice was raw. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. Silence fell over the floor, broken only by the distant sounds of the building groaning under its own weight. Tom's heart sank. He pressed his ear to the door, straining to hear anything, but there was only silence. Despair washed over him once more. He backed away from the door, his legs feeling weak. The hope that had surged through him moments before evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. They were alone. There would be no rescue. He stumbled back to the window, looking out at the city one last time. The wind felt cool on his face, a stark contrast to the heat inside. Tom closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He thought of Anna, of their child, of the life he had lived. He thought of the people he loved, the memories he cherished. And then, with a sense of calm resignation, he made his choice. Tom opened his eyes, looking out over the city. The sun was shining, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers. It was a beautiful day, a day like any other. He took one last look at the world he was leaving behind, and then he stepped forward, embracing the wind, the sky, and the unknown.